All right, I'm here with Lukas Harkins, a national college basketball writer and bracketologist for Heat Check. Thank you for coming on. I know you obviously, not obviously, for those who don't know, a big part of the almanac and writing for not just the Bryant page, but the American East, the Ivy League, along with some other conferences. I kind of want to get right to it. Can you just speak to, how impressive, Coach Grosso, what he's been able to do just at Bryant, making this transition to the American East, bringing in this transfer class?
Yeah, he's had a really good run. I mean, I think the build up over the last few years really culminated well this past season when really that transfer class with Peter Kiss got into its second year together, really grew into that NCAA tournament caliber team last year. And really, it's just been kind of a year over year build. And now heading into the America East, kind of the same concept as it was maybe 2 years ago for Bryant. A really big transfer class coming in, some big name guys, obviously Earl Timberlake probably being the biggest name of that group, preseason first team All America East already. So he's probably that crowning jewel of that group, but kind of the same feeling of they might have 1 or 2 year run here at the top of the America East before he needs another one of those big transfer classes.
Yeah. And you had mentioned, I think it was in the almanac, there's a quote, from Grosso about, kind of it coming down to playing hard every day. They have the talent. I've been to practice a few times. Playing hard is going to be their calling card, I think. I mean, the practices are intense. They play fast. You had mentioned pace, the American East being a slower league last year. How do you think the pace in which Bryant has played with and will this year could benefit them in the conference?
Yeah, I think they're one of the interesting teams. Obviously, there was a lot of conference realignment this offseason, a lot of teams moving across the country into different leagues. And I think it's tricky. I think Bryant is in a better space than a lot of teams that have changed conferences because while they're not obviously accustomed to playing the rest of the America East. They also are bringing a style of play that the rest of the America East isn't used to seeing either. They play with such a frenetic pace that's so distinct on both ends of the floor, where they mix in that zone defensively. They're really up tempo on offense. I think that they're a team that's going to be tricky to game plan for in a new league. Just as kind of a double edged sword of as hard as it might be to game plan for new opponents. Those new opponents don't aren't accustomed to facing Bryant either.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously Vermont has been kind of the king of the group, king of the conference, as of late in recent history. You know, with Bryant, obviously the preseason poll came out today. They're, expected to finish second. But what is the ceiling for, you think, a Bryant in terms of being in the American East, not being a 16, 15 seed? I feel like with their non-conference, right? They win the American East. They have an ability to jump to 11, 12 seed. Is that out of the question?
11 or 12 is pretty high. I think generally speaking, the America East title is usually around a 13 or 14 seed, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
And that's probably where I see things this year. We've seen Vermont get a little bit higher on some years or in some projections, partially just because they've had really dominant years. I mean, I think that Bryant will have a hard time being that dominant because they have to play Vermont, and the same kind of goes for Vermont either. If they can give really up to that 12 line is going to be more challenging now if they can add a loss or two to Bryant in the middle of the season. That changes the way they're viewed by the committee in terms of getting out of that 12 line. But I think certainly into that 13, 14 range, I think it is definitely in range of possibility for both Vermont or Bryant as the two favorites coming into the year.
Definitely. And, last question. You mentioned obviously there's some guys that people are familiar with, some of the transfers like Timberlake. Obviously, Doug coming in, I think he'll have a great year. He's going to be putting up obviously a lot more threes than he was. But is there a name on that roster that may not be getting the attention that you think is crucial to their success?
Probably Miles Latimer or Sharif Grosso. Honestly, I mean, both of them bring different skills to the mat to the league. Sharif Grosso obviously has had success at LaSalle, changed his name over the summer
Yeah.
from Sharif Kenny, but he's a big time player. I think you can kind of pair him in the backcourt with Charles Pride. When while like Edard's a guard, he's not necessarily really a ball handler.
Yeah.
And I think Kenny gives a lot of really good size, 6'4", can kind of play combo guard, kind of along the same lines Pride can. And then Ladder has had success in his career. I mean, he's played in big games across better conferences in the Patriot. He's not like than the America East, but in a better conference than necessarily Edert coming over from St. Peter's. Both really good shooters, Edert and Latimer, and I think they're both going to really push for those wing minutes next to Pride and get that supplemental scoring that they'll need after losing Kiss.
So with Pride coming in, obviously they lost Peter Kiss, but Pride had one heck of a year. You look at his numbers last year as well. Sometimes maybe got overshadowed. Not if you're obviously a Bryant fan or you followed him closely. Does he have the ability of being the best player in that league?
Yeah, I think so. I think it wouldn't surprise me if he was the preseason player of the year. I can't remember if I actually made that distinction in the almanac or not. I'm a huge Dylan Penn fan at Vermont.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's going to miss the early portion of the season with a broken hand, maybe the first couple weeks, but he'll be back for conference play. I think those two guys are probably in the mix. I think Pride's going to put up the best numbers in the league for sure. Obviously, a high volume scorer and the fastest tempo in the conference. If he doesn't lead the conference in scoring, he got hurt. I think that's kind of the only way that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I think he'll definitely be in the mix for conference player of the year, if not the favorite throughout.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Love your work. Also, obviously on the almanac, I know it's a huge process, but it's a great get if you obviously don't have it already. But thank you.
Thanks so much for having me on.